He was a real handful most of the time, and dumb as a post. That was the part. He didn't know he was raised. We had to adopt him. A woman moved off island, and at age 2 years, he was 2 years old, and just couldn't take him to New York City. But she got a new job in New York, so
Okay.
we had just lost my lab, so we
We're
inherited
now
it.
live, just so you all know.
Thank you.
We're now live.
Thank
Roll
you. I'll be quiet. I'll tell you.
Apologies.
I'll tell you
Have a good
stories
one, guys.
later.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you, Ross. I think we're still,
I'm just checking on Joe, okay?
yeah, it looks like Joe.
Oh, here he is.
He's here. Are we waiting on Maureen?
Yes. Oops. She'll probably be here in a second. I'll keep an eye out for her.
I'm late.
That's right. So I will begin with our remote script and hopefully we'll have Maureen. Oh, here she is. Okay. So as a preliminary matter, this is Ashley Erisman, Chair of the Nantucket Conservation Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Beal,
Yes.
Seth Engelborg,
Here.
Ian Golding,
Yes.
Maureen Phillips,
Here.
and Joe Topham.
Here.
All right, we will not have Dave LaFleur tonight. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Joanne Dodd.
Yeah.
And anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Looks like we have Brian Madden,
Here.
Ryan Maxwell,
Here.
Art Gasparo,
Here.
Leah Hill. Here. Jen Carberg,
Here.
Karen Beatty,
Here.
and Naomi Valentine.
Here.
All right, thank you. Good evening. This open meeting of the Nantucket Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Nantucket Conservation Commission is convening by video conference via Zoom app, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to
not ejected properly.
Take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. And for items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. Staff will activate the chat feature on YouTube. Members of the public that have comments or questions can use this feature to communicate with the public body. Instructions are on the town's website. And the chair and/or staff will do their best to address questions or comments. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So with that, we will get to the first item on the agenda, which is public comment. I'm not sure if we have any public comment at this point. Looks like we do not have public comment as of yet. And this might be a question for NCTV if they're
As of yet.
I'm not seeing the YouTube up on my computer.
I'm not either. I just said the same thing to him.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got it on different web browsers as well. So I'm not sure why you guys should. I'm seeing you guys live on YouTube in different browsers and chat's enabled. So I'm
Okay, as long as chat's enabled.
Yeah, I can see the chat enabled. I'm not seeing picture, but I'll just keep going and trust NCTV that it's up for others.
Ashley,
Yes.
so I went to the Nantucket Government YouTube TV station and I saw what you were seeing as well. It just said waiting. The chat's enabled on there. But then on the actual Zoom in the top left, I copied the streaming link where it says live, and I can see the video at that link. So I think the link that was posted and the link that is actually the link might be different. So maybe we'll just drop the real link in the chat for the other chat. And
Got
see
it.
Thank you, Steph. I'm sure members of the public are having the same issue navigating this. So thank you for picking up on that. Okay, well, hopefully people will figure it out. And I think the link is in the chat for us. For now, the following items are continued. Under notices of intent, we have the Town of Nantucket DPW town-wide, continued until March 25th.
don't understand.
We have Weisenberger at 84 Pocomo Road, continued until March 11th. We have Troja Nominee Trust at 26 Easy Street, continued until March 11th. Under amended orders of conditions, we have Baltzer at 66 Hulbert Nominee Trust, at 66 Hulbert Avenue, continued until March 11th. Under certificates of compliance, we have Nantucket Island Land Bank at 35 Almanac Pond Road, continued until March 11th. And that is it for our continuances. So we will begin the meeting tonight with Nantucket Conservation Foundation, 11 Heads of Plain Road. We have Naomi Valentine and Karen Beatty on to speak for this one.
All right. Thank you very much. Naomi Valentine from SWCA, representing the Nantucket Conservation Foundation. This was continued from a couple of hearings ago, and we were waiting for response back from our MISA review request, as well as any other state agencies. We got response back from the Department of Marine Fisheries, and we did get our MISA determination letter as well. Both approved the project as proposed, and both put time of year restrictions on activities. So the DMF requested that any treatment, so herbicide application, be restricted from April 1st to June 15th to protect river herring spawning habitat during the first year of treatment. And they put a comment in there that they'd like to follow up after hearing the results of the treatment before putting further year restrictions or what have you on the project scope. Similarly, there were species identified by Natural Heritage in the MISA response letter. They proposed a time of year restriction within the Barrier Beach dune location on the southwest portion, where you can see on that screen share image where the beach is located, from April 1st to August 31st, unless under direct oversight of qualified shorebird monitor. Luckily, the Nantucket Conservation Foundation does have a qualified personnel who actually was the one who identified the piping plover that they're concerned about in there to begin with. So they're familiar with the monitoring and sweep and protection protocols. That restriction was repeated in their second bullet item, just saying that we have the responsibility to protect the breeding habitat as well as the species itself. And so we do plan to have a monitor present when we are working in that area. Their time of year restriction is broader than DMF. They requested April 1st to August 31st, which is within the time frame proposed for this project. And so we'll make sure that that monitor is present. They also put a comment in about the native plantings that are proposed in the restoration phase of the project, that they be native vegetation and that we consult Kelly Omand from the Nantucket Conservation Foundation. So as they're within the applicant's organization, we can make sure to follow through on that. And those were all of the comments. So we feel comfortable that we can move forward with the scope of work with those time of year restrictions and monitoring requirements.
Thank you, Naomi. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Look, oh, Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Naomi, I asked you for examples of where it had been used in Massachusetts. Did I fail to see the inclusion or?
And I'm good to move forward with a response, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Okay. You had requested for case studies, which I unfortunately wasn't able to track down because within Massachusetts, all of the examples I could find, including from within SWCA, were not long enough term projects that any case studies had been developed. But I can tell you that we have used ClearCast on 2 shoreline applications in Western Massachusetts, one in Amherst and one in the Berkshires. And we had a conversation as well with, I reached out to the supplier because they often have case study information for their products. They were supposed to get back to me today with location and photos, but I didn't hear back from them from Massachusetts. They did say that they had examples, but unfortunately didn't follow through on that. We did also have a conversation, the Nantucket Conservation Foundation and I, with another certified applicator firm, Solitude Lake Management, earlier today, who confirmed that they have used it on a large number of sites across the state, and they were fairly certain that it's been used on Nantucket in the past, but that representative couldn't confirm that. He was out in the field doing some work and wasn't at his computer to 100% confirm. And I could say from our experience, without having a documented case study, it has been as effective as we would expect from a glyphosate treatment. It does react with the plant material in a different manner, so it has a delayed response visually, but it has very good coverage in diminishing or eliminating regrowth of the vegetation in the following growing season. That was a comment from the same representative from Solitude Lake Management that we spoke to earlier today, that even though sometimes within the same growing season, it doesn't appear that there's been a huge effect, there's a very dramatic effect noticed in the following growing season when the vegetation is expected to resprout. So I apologize, I wasn't able to get full case studies, but I can cite those examples.
Please, no apology necessary. Obviously, you've done your best. But I guess maybe you can alleviate my concern, but it's sort of more the impact on aquatic life and whether or not it would be worth setting this up in such a way that, it could be a case study as to whether it did have any negative impact on aquatic life. So that's sort of the direction of my questioning. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I didn't realize that that was the concern that you have when you had requested that information. I can say that the documentation that we included with the submission was sort of in line with the broad use of the chemical and effects,
Right.
And then also the review documents on the Mass DEP and Department of Ag websites review those low toxicity rates on the species that need to be checked prior to approval with the EPA file registration number.
Thank you, Naomi. And do you have a follow-up? And then
Well,
Steve,
only that, you know, in light of the controversy over Roundup over the decades, you know, you may call me slightly skeptical in some ways. And so
Right.
yeah, thank you.
I would say that the history of pesticide use in the US for sure, well, across the globe, has been dubious in the past. But I think that after examples, studies come to light, the registration and not registration, when there's a review done on these herbicides and pesticides in general, it's much more vigilant now. You're not allowed to produce your own reports within the company who is creating the herbicide alone. So there's more checks and balances now than there once was. I don't know if that's a good response or not, but.
Well, no, it's reassuring. Thank you. Since you're the expert, so thank you.
thank you, Naomi. Seth, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I mean, Ian, I welcome your skepticism, but I know a little bit about the history of the pesticide being mentioned, ClearCast. It's been registered for use in Massachusetts since 2013. It underwent all the testing by MDAR, DEP, and EPA, showing that it's not toxic to aquatic species. I know also it's made by SC Pro, who's the same company who makes Procellacor, who we authorized use for parrot feather last year. So, I mean, skepticism on chemicals is fine, but I think given that the documentation exists out there, it's unlikely to have negative effects. I think if we want to have the applicant submit monitoring reports of aquatic species, that's fine, but I don't anticipate any negative effects of that specific pesticide.
Thank you, Seth. Mark, you had a question, and then Maureen?
I did have a question, yes. I note that there's two landowners on the western edge of the property. I'd be curious to know their reaction to this plan.
I guess they would have gotten notified of the project and would have had the opportunity to write in or participate if they had issue with it, would be my assumption there. Maureen and then Ian.
Can I actually, this is Karen Beatty. Could I address your question, Ashley?
Oh, yep. Go ahead, Karen.
There are letters of support from both of those property owners in the application. One of them is in full support and the other one supports the project and requested that we do beach planting along the dunes to replace any phragmites that gets removed. And that's why we included that in our application.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Maureen?
I just had a question, looking through, and I think we'd seen this before, but maybe I didn't notice it. In the second, let's see, it's your wildlife observations on page 3 of the second set of things. And I've lived on Long Pond, for, a while, and it was that SWCA did not observe any amphibians or fish, and noted a few bird species. And I just, we've got snapping turtles, and there are fish, people come and fish. I'm not a fisher person, but I don't know what they would be. And we certainly have ospreys and swans, and we have egrets. We have a ton of water birds, shorebirds. So it just seemed odd to me that those weren't observed.
So we conducted this survey on one specific day, and we weren't looking for all wildlife. So I suppose I should have started that section by saying, while the scope of our survey didn't include wildlife observations, these were the few that we did note while we were there. But right, it is not an all-inclusive list by any means, but thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Ian, was your hand back up?
Well, Karen basically reiterated what I was going to say, but I think Maureen does bring up an interesting point about whether there'd be nest disturbance or anything along those lines. One could guard against that. I don't know if that's an open-ended question to either Naomi or Seth.
Naomi, do you have a response?
Well, I would say in terms of time of the year, we would be looking to be cutting the vegetation back prior to when nesting would usually begin. And we can make sure, and that could be a part of the condition if we're concerned about that, if there are existing nests. None were noted during the survey, not to say that there could have been more embedded in, but because we're taking a pretty slow moving manual approach to the cutting, it would be easy enough to avoid and work around. There's certainly a lot of phragmites out there, so if there was any need to avoid active wildlife activity, we could do that and still have plenty of work to get done.
Thank you, Naomi. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Joanne, do we have any comments from the public on this one?
We don't have any comments from the public on this one. We're just having some issues with people trying to get into the chat.
Okay.
Not for this one.
Well, hopefully that will resolve. Joanne, do we have everything we need to close this?
Yes, we do.
Naomi, would you guys like to close?
Yes, we would. Thank you.
Is there a motion to close? Motion by Maureen. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal.
Aye, and just for the record, Chrome does not work and Safari does show YouTube live.
Good to know.
And aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to Nantucket Conservation Foundation, Medui Creek, and this is represented by Jennifer Carberg and Leah Cabral.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm Jennifer Carberg with the Nantucket Conservation Foundation, and we're here to present a proposed restoration research project that the foundation, in collaboration with the town of Nantucket, is hoping to initiate out at our Medui Creek property. And this, if the commission remembers, is a property where the foundation has conducted other research projects, a salt marsh restoration project. And then 2 years ago, we were before you with a management project to reduce the purple crab populations, which were causing salt marsh dieback within Medui Creek. We did that work in 2019 and 2020 and have at least submitted one report to you guys on the results of that restoration project. We were trapping the crabs and removing them and allowing the native grasses to regrow, which so far has proven fairly successful. This oyster reef project that we're looking at is kind of a next step within that research project. And it's looking at a way to potentially stabilize that salt marsh shoreline. With the salt marsh dieback, there's been a lot of exposed sediments. And while our crab removal project is going well and we are seeing Spartina regrowing within the marsh, there is still a lot of exposed sediments. And other projects that are in places where the crab populations that have done this have restabilized, it's usually taken about 10 years. And within that time, there is significant salt marsh loss as the soil erodes just through regular tide events. And then salt marsh dieback, there's been a lot of exposed sediments and then through significant storm events, which can also break off chunks of the salt marsh sediment. So without the grass in place, the salt marsh sediment is really susceptible. So one of the things that we looked at was potentially finding a way to stabilize that shoreline while the restoration of the grass is in progress, while the management of the crabs is happening. And research that's happened in other places in the country has looked at putting intertidal, small intertidal oyster reefs in front of salt marshes. These oyster reefs are fairly low profile. As the oysters grow on the reefs, they kind of grow in size, depending on the height of the water that's coming in as well. They can provide some buffering of that shoreline. They basically slow down the impacts of waves and the height of waves that are coming in. Even just regular tidal flow kind of gets mediated and slowed so that it doesn't impact the shoreline quite as intensely as it would without the reef in place. On the first map that we have here, you can see the overview of the green, which is the entire Medowie Creek area. The blue, the light blue, is essentially the area in front of the creek, of the salt marsh outflow where we're hoping to put the reef. You can also see there's a pink box just down the harbor a little bit, and that's our reference area. We have an extensive monitoring program we've put in place around this so that we can monitor both where we're putting in the reef and then look at areas where the reef is not in place to see what's happening there. Joanne, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is our conceptual design and an example of what we're looking to use for the oyster reef itself. So in the top photo, you can see the blue lines. We're looking to have 3 thin oyster reef lines that are staggered and placed in front of that creek mouth that's coming off of the salt marsh. In that aerial photo, you can actually see the dieback extent around the creek there. Staggering it this way along the creek front means that tidal water can still move in freely in and out of that creek and in and around that salt marsh area. So we're not creating a solid breakwall that doesn't allow the water to move up naturally into the salt marsh. Instead, we're putting small areas of impediment that will allow the water to slow down as it's approaching that shoreline and take some of that erosive power out. The product that we're looking to use are oyster castles, which you can see in the second picture there. These are concrete blocks that are essentially look like Legos or castle structures that stack on each other in multiple different configurations. The picture there is the configuration we're hoping to use. This company has supplied oyster castles to a number of restoration projects, particularly in the Chesapeake Bay area, in New Jersey as well, and other places. Just this will be the first time it's used in Massachusetts. The concrete is of a substrate that actually will attract oyster spat to it. The oyster spat needs to have a solid substrate to settle on, and there is essentially no substrate for oysters within Pulpus Harbor right now. The one thing I wanted to point out about this configuration with the reef is that putting it this way, stacking the blocks this way, there is also not a solid front to what that reef is. There's multiple angles. The blocks are hollow inside, so there's spaces for water to move as it's hitting that reef. This is another component that makes it not a solid breakwall front, so that as water and waves are coming in, they're not refracting in one direction or necessarily creating end scour effects of having this reef out in the intertidal zone. The reef will likely be, our placement is intertidal out here, and we're looking at about 20 to 30 feet off the shoreline, so we're not right up against the salt marsh shoreline. Having it there will potentially, should slow the water down, might also potentially give areas behind the reef for sediment to settle out, creating some lower energy areas where we could potentially rebuild some habitat out there. If you, Joanne, would go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have extensive monitoring out there, and in conjunction with Leah and the Natural Resources Department, we did pre-sampling out on the site this year to document current site conditions. And there's extremely low habitat value out there right now. We ran transects coming out from the marsh. You can see there in the pink. We looked at the vegetation in the marsh. We monitored the marsh and its current elevation status. And then we looked at substrate, we looked at water quality, we looked at temperature and water height and light penetration. out here, all characteristics that would indicate whether or not oysters would thrive. We also put out spat collectors for oyster spat. And broadly, what we found is that we didn't find any oyster spat this year out there in the area coming in. Our plan is to, and Leah can speak more to this, we're going to set spat on the oyster castles, and we're hopefully going to put some spat on oyster shell and place that adjacent to the oyster reef. That will help attract that in itself will help the oysters grow in population on the reef itself, and then hopefully will grow more as well. The monitoring we did this year, we will also replicate, and all the other years afterwards, to see the impacts of having this reef out there in the first place. We've got a really unique or an interesting data logger. It's called a tilt logger, and it's free moving and on a concrete block on the bottom of the floor there in the intertidal area. And it is continuously collecting data on the direction of water flow, the force of water flow. And so we can see how water is moving in that area without the reef. And then we'll be able to see how water is moving with the reef in place as well, and actually put a number to how that reef is impacting the force of water that's coming into the site. Joanne, if you would go to the next one, please. I think that's the last one. And it's just to show you the characteristics of the site where we're going to be. There are no boats mooring directly in this area. We will put up, if we get permission to put the reef out, we will make sure that there are buoys around where that reef area is. It's definitely in that intertidal zone and fairly shallow. So there aren't a lot of boats that would go there in the first place, but we'll make sure that it is marked so that there are no issues. You can see from these photos taken at low tide that there's no eelgrass, there's no vegetation in the intertidal zone. I think we maybe found one mussel when we were digging for shellfish out there, one mussel and one clam on our 4 transects. So there wasn't a lot to begin with. The oyster reef in place should increase biodiversity in the area. We're also hoping that it will increase water quality in this portion of Pulpus Harbor. I believe that's all that I have to present. I just wanted to say that Leah's on the call right now, but has to leave by 5:45. So if there's anything that she wanted to add about the oysters, or if people had questions specifically about the oysters, that is her area of expertise.
Thank you, Jen. Leah, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think Jen covered it all. Under our permit with the hatchery, we'll be able to grow the oysters in our facility, and then if the project moves forward, be able to move them to Pulpus Harbor. We had a conversation with the Division of Marine Fisheries, and they don't see a problem with the project area or bringing oysters into Pulpus. So that's good news. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any oyster questions before I have to leave.
Thank you, Leah. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Ian and then Seth.
So Jen, nice to see you. And fascinating, subsidized housing for oysters, huh?
Yep, pretty much. Affordable housing, I guess.
I noticed that it was proprietary cement when I went onto their website. So I wish you every success. One doesn't want to see it reduced to oyster slums from oyster castles. So do we get to eat them after a few years?
That is a very good question. We are going to apply for a research permit through DMF for the shellfish as our shellfish permit. And that will actually enable it to be closed to broader harvesting, at least while we're doing the research, which is great. In the future, we'll have to consider when we're not under that research permit any longer, the state does require us to open it for some period of time for harvest, and we'll have a conversation about how to do that, most likely some kind of educational event, since the foundation doesn't typically participate in we wouldn't open it up to any commercial use. So we would possibly do an educational event. Maybe we can have, oysters and salt marsh kind of event out on the site.
A fundraiser.
Yep.
Anyway, I wish you every success.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Jen. You already answered 2 of the questions I had, so no need, but just one technical question for Leah. I don't see any issue with the Oyster Castle per se, but what was the reason that was chosen rather than just like mounding up shell like was tried at the Shimo Reef?
Yeah, that's a great question, Seth. So with the Shimo restoration project, I noticed after the first 2 years that we put just the loose shell out there, that it actually sank in the mud. And so the mouth of Madawi Creek is pretty soft. So the oyster castles allow a bigger surface area. And so they might kind of sink a little bit, but with that height, it'll give enough area for the oyster larvae to attach to. And so they're not, the castles aren't all going to sink in the mud.
Thank you, Leah. Jen?
Yep, if I can add to that, that's a great question, Seth. One of the other reasons is we looked at a project that Mass Audubon had done back in 2009 to 2011. They actually tested out various kinds of oyster substrate and had a number of categories of success, but one of them was how well the oyster reef held up, given ice scour, winter storms, other storm events coming in with tide events, how well the reef structure itself held up, and then actually how well the oysters would grow, the population size and recruitment. And they had, I believe it was 4 different substrate types. The oyster castles were above and beyond the best, performed the best. And so given that there is not a ton right now of natural oyster recruitment in that harbor, and we're looking to protect the shoreline, those are kind of the 2 reasons we thought this substrate, we'd at least try it out here and see how it does in this site.
Well, thank you. Many people know that I've been vocal on this commission advocating for living shoreline, so I really appreciate seeing these types of projects come in for permitting. Thank you.
And in English common law, it makes it quite clear that an oyster's castle is its home.
That's certainly the hope.
I see Mark is shaking his head. Okay.
Well, I know I'm excited to see this project, and if you need like a student opportunity to harvest oysters, I'm sure there would be a way to make that happen as well.
I'm sure that we could build some student opportunities into this project.
Yes. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Joanne, do we have any comments or questions from the public?
We don't on this.
Okay. Do we have everything we need to close this one?
Yes, we do. We got the file number an hour or so ago. Sweet.
Jen, would you like to close?
Sure, absolutely.
Is there a motion to close?
Also move.
Motion made by Mark, seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And that moves us on to Moline at 27 Winoma Way. And this is represented by Jeff Blackwell. No, do we have Jeff on yet?
See him.
I don't think we do. So I guess we'll move on.
Maybe go back to it.
Yeah, we can go back if he comes on. So that moves us on to Sandhurst MV LLC at 67 Swam Road, and this is represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm before you tonight with a notice of intent for an application which is solely related to the installation of some plantings in the buffer zone adjacent to an existing border and vegetated wetland. I believe many of you are familiar with this particular property at 67 Swam Road. There's been a couple different permits issued the last few years, as well as more recently certificates of compliance. The application is for, there's also a landscape plan which is included, is to remove some hydrangea and some privet and install some plantings which we believe would be considered more beneficial to the commission, groundsel, sweet pepperbush, and tupelo. And that is essentially the extent of the application. On the plan, it's shown as the two areas outlined in red. It's immediately adjacent to the one on the south, is within the 25-foot buffer zone. But again, it's currently more landscaped and maintained, and we'd be making it more like a native naturalized buffer zone there, and immediately adjacent to an existing permitted shell driveway. And then the planting area to the north is along an existing patio, and it may be helpful to also have a look at the landscape plan. Thank you, Joe. And I'd be happy to address questions or concerns. I may add, Madam Chair, I've met with both the landscape designer on the site who, in her selection of the plants, as well as Mr. Shampoo, who is going to be doing this work and is, well-versed in the regulations and expectations of the commission, so that this work can be done without any adverse impact or effect.
Thank you, Art. I know I loved reading this plan, and it just said remove hydrangeas, and I just thought that was the best thing ever. So I appreciate it. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Overall, I think this is a great project. I just would want to make sure that no heavy machinery is getting stored in the 25-foot buffer, and that if any equipment is being used, is being stored outside of the resource area.
Thank you, Seth. I'm sure we can write that into the conditions. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Joe, do we have any comments from the public on this one?
Not on this one, no.
Okay. Do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Art, would you
Sorry,
like
just double checking that.
That's all right.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Okay, is there a motion to close? Motion made by Ian. Is there a second? Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to 9 E Street LLC at 9 E Street, represented by Brian Madden.
Thank you very much. Representing the applicant, Brian Madden from LEC. At the 2 meetings ago, there were some questions about the construction sequence methodology to ensure no adverse impacts on surrounding properties. We submitted that draft construction sequence and really just to confirm that no vibratory hammers, steel sheeting, or pile drivers will be used in the cottage foundation replacement and installation of the new IA septic tank. And I can answer any questions if there are any at this time.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Ian?
I just would like to thank Brian for taking people's concerns into account. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And
Maureen?
And I would like to second that. It was it's nice to see that kind of cooperation. So thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Any other questions or comments? Joanne, do we have any comments from the public on this one?
I'm not seeing anything yet. I don't know if we want to another second because there's been some technical difficulties on the chat feature tonight.
Of course, there's tech issues today.
Jeff's over there in Western Mass doing something.
Do we have everything we would need to close?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Brian, would you like to close?
Please.
Okay. One more check of the.
Not saying anything. I think we're
Yeah,
good.
I don't think there's anything. Is there a motion to close?
Motion to close.
Motion made by Joe. Is there a second? Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to Weigold at 3 New Hummock Circle, also represented by Brian Madden.
Thank you very much. Again, for the record, Brian Madden from LEC. A proposed project as submitted originally involved installation of a pool and expansion of a stone patio and some landscaping updates. All that activity was outside the 50-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands on the eastern portion of the property. Since the original submission, we were notified by Conservation Office of some unauthorized activities that were previously performed on the property prior to the current property owners who closed on the property in, I believe, September. And effectively that involved installation of existing shed between the 25 and 50-foot buffer zones. And there was some brush cutting activity that encroached into the wetland and some minimal lawn expansion. And so in order to rectify that and bring the property back into compliance, the current property owners are proposing to relocate that shed outside the 50-foot buffer zone. So it's southeast of the proposed pool location. And there was also a generator over in that location that's going to be relocated as well. The pool equipment is now outside the 100-foot buffer zone, and the 25-foot buffer zone in its entirety is going to be proposed to be revegetated. And we had listed out a number of native wildflower and grass plugs in addition to a native fescue seed mix, and asking for a waiver for that restoration work, again, to bring everything back into compliance. And I'll turn it over to questions at this point.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? I had one, Brian. So on the first plan that was submitted that has like the shed, within the 50, there was also a pergola on that plan. Has that just been like demoed or removed completely?
Yeah, what happened there was the survey was completed over the summer, and I think the past owners took it with them in September.
Okay.
So it's no longer there.
All right. Thank you. So it looks like there's no other questions or comments from commissioners. Joe, do we have any comments from the public?
We do not.
Do we have everything we need to close this one?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Brian, would you like to close?
Please.
Is there a motion to close? Motion
Sure.
by Ian. Is there a second? Seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham. All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to Andrew and Brooke Rieger at 7 East Lincoln Avenue, and this is represented by Ryan Maxwell.
Thank you. For the record, Ryan Maxwell with Bracken Engineering. The property at 7 East Lincoln Ave is located in an area of land subject to coastal storm flowage. The flood zone is an AE zone, elevation 7. and the site is at roughly elevation 2 to 3. The applicant is proposing to tear down the existing structure and to construct a new single-family dwelling in its place, along with a detached garage. The new dwelling will be built on a crawl space foundation with the top of foundation elevated above the flood zone, and the garage is going to be constructed on a slab foundation. Both structures will have the necessary flood vents and flood proofing that FEMA requires. That's more or less the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Joe, do we have any comments or questions from the public on this?
We do not know.
Okay. Do we have everything we'd need to close?
Yes, we do.
Ryan, would you like to close?
Yes.
Is there a motion to close? A motion made by Maureen, seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Popham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks.
And that moves us on to Goran and Melinda Puljic, excuse me, at 14 Almanac Pond Road, represented by Brian Madden.
Thank you very much. Brian Madden, for the record, from LEC, representing the Pulchiks. The proposed project involves the creation of an agricultural and garden area and some fencing updates on the property. To give you a sense of the resource areas, there's bordering vegetated wetlands from the Conservation Foundation's windswept bogs that minimally creep onto the eastern portion of the property. There's 2 isolated vegetated wetlands in the central portion of the site. And there's also mapped flood zone, floodplain that extends onto the property. However, it's not tied into a specific elevation. And the way it digitizes and overlays doesn't match existing topographic contours. And so the proposed work, I'll start in and around the house. There's currently barbed wire fence that runs parallel to Almanac Pond Road and then along portion of the eastern property boundary. That is going to be replaced with a wire fence, 4-foot tall wire fence. And then once it wraps around on the east side of the house, it's going to transition to a split rail fence with wire. All that is outside the 50-foot buffer zone. And that's basically just to contain an area for dogs. The proposed agricultural and garden area within the northwesterly portion of the site, as you see crosshatched, and maybe just, yeah, thanks, Joe. The intent there is to create an area for sustainable organic farming for flowers, herbs, vegetables. The area will be encircled by a 7 to 8 foot tall deer fence. Not proposing to do any substantive earthwork or grading up there, maybe some minimal recontouring, but certainly no fill to be added. Again, this is an organic, sustainable farming activity out here on a residential property, so it doesn't hold the same ag exemptions as a commercial property would, but pretty innocuous use of the landscape for that sustainable organic farming. And with that, there's no waivers proposed or required, and I'll turn it over to questions.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? So Brian, I know I have one. I get, unfortunately, sometimes even more nervous when I hear like organic amendments, because a lot of our organic amendments can actually leach faster than some chemical fertilizers. So I didn't know if you guys have already soil tested this location and what sort of soil testing protocol you're going to have in place up there. Because it looks to me, is it that whole like upper property that they're wanting to farm, or just a really tiny area?
The large majority of that area, yes. We can give you some additional information. The owner who will be operating this does have a background degree in sustainable agriculture. So we can provide a little bit more information on that. The intent is to have no adverse impact on the surrounding resource areas, especially with, the adjacent bog restoration on Conservation Foundation. What I didn't mention too, also, that we don't have the natural heritage letter. So we're within that 30 days. So we can certainly provide you with that information as we continue.
Thank you, Brian. I guess I have another question if there aren't any other commissioners' questions. So I was a little nervous about this one with all the wire fencing, being how much turtle habitat is right there, because I know that turtles will actually kind of get stuck in fencing. Like if they're wanting to go one direction, they'll kind of keep going. And I don't know if there's any way to monitor for that, but there's enough wire fencing around all that habitat that I was somewhat uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be kept free of vegetation. And I think, the time of year that turtles are going to be moving around for nesting in June, typically, they're going to be out there doing gardening, et cetera. The footprint itself, there's no open sandy areas for nesting, but any potential migration activity, I think generally speaking, it would be a somewhat de minimis impact, but certainly anything that does, any large adults that do hit it will be redirected around it. 2-inch openings, so hatchlings certainly would be able to get in and out. But I don't think we want to create also a scenario where we're attracting adult turtles in to nest in the garden area, because that's not necessarily a safe area to nest. But I think in general, and I deal a lot with turtles on the mainland, that I think generally speaking, impacts would be avoided here.
Okay, thank you. Because I walk out there a lot, and it's like May, June, July. I mean, the turtle activity is insane out there.
Okay.
Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know it's a significant amount of fence, and I don't know if the homeowner would be amenable to this, but if there was concern, is it possible to just change the bottom 1 foot of the material from wire to like wood or something, and then start the wire higher? That's something to consider. I mean, turtles aren't jumping, they're on the ground. So even if it was 6 inches or 8 inches, that could completely minimize the effect.
We can review that in more detail. I think, there may be a concern about rabbits more easily getting in and out of that area too. So that probably would want to be avoided.
Thank you, Brian, and Seth, for your comment. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Joanne, do we have any comments from the public on this one?
We do not know.
Okay. So Brian, it sounds like you need to continue for natural heritage.
Correct.
Would you like to continue for 2 weeks?
Please.
Okay, so this will continue until March 11th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we did have a continuance come in while that was happening. So 27 Winoma Way was continued until March 11th. And that moves us on to Carly Hagdorn at 34 Westchester Street. and 3 Wesco Place. And this is represented by Brian Madden, Seth Wilkinson, and Julie Jordan. And I believe we have the property owner on as well.
Madam Chairman and Commissioners, my name is Jim Hagedorn. My wife Carly, who is the applicant. Carly owns the property because I watched her fall in love with the place. I thought it'd be better if she owned it. We're both thrilled to be involved with this restoration to the house, the property, and our part of the lily pond. We understand the significance of the home and the property. We're very willing partners with the Historic District Commission, the Conservation Commission, and Historic New England. We're engaged in cooperative discussions with the land bank to ensure that our restoration work in the area around the lily pond is coordinated with theirs. For your information, we purchased the land next to us at 3 Wesco that was about to get approval for a new house. We don't intend to develop that property. We purchased it for our privacy and to enhance the country feel of this unique 3-acre in-town parcel. For this application, Carly and I assembled the best team we could: Brian Madden, Seth Wilkinson, Don Bracken, Bartlett Tree Service, and Julie Jordan. Excuse me. The application is pretty straightforward. It's unlike most of the applications you guys get. We are not looking to develop in the jurisdiction area. The application is really about one thing: to remove invasives in and around the lily pond and restore it to a beautiful and healthy environment. With that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thank you very much. As Jim had alluded to, the proposed project is a comprehensive invasive species management and vegetation restoration project. I'm going to turn over to Seth in a little bit, but just to hit on it very quickly at a high level. So the northerly tip to bordering vegetated wetlands that extend onto the land bank lily pond property occur within the central portion of the site. That wetland boundary has been approved under a valid determination of applicability. All along that wetland boundary are very dense Japanese knotweed stand that transition to a buffer zone that is occupied primarily by either bittersweet, porcelain berry, bush honeysuckle, multiflora rose, garlic mustard, just every invasive species on Nantucket. You can name it, it's out there. Outside of lawn areas that occur in and around that existing garage. So Wilkinson became involved with the project to develop a pretty comprehensive restoration management program. And before I turn that over to him to review in a little bit more detail, just some other aspects that are being proposed. So the existing driveway to that garage off of Wesco Place is proposed to be abandoned and revegetated as part of the restoration plan. And a new driveway is proposed to extend off of 3 Wesco Place, the property that was recently acquired. If you remember, I had worked on the approval of a single-family dwelling on that lot. We did get a certificate of compliance at the last meeting for no work activity on that. So the driveway relocation will be outside the 50-foot buffer zone. Another aspect of the proposed work involves a greenhouse immediately south of the existing garage. That's within a existing foundation footprint. And the greenhouse is just going to be placed directly within that. There's no expansion or reconfiguration. It's within a pre-developed footprint. And restoration aspects, just in general, almost 4,000 square feet of lawn area is proposed to be removed and revegetated. 1,300 square feet of which is within the 25-foot buffer zone. And again, the host of the invasives within the buffer and into the vegetated wetland will be managed. And with that, I'll turn it over to Seth to elaborate.
Thank you, Brian. For the record, Seth Wilkinson, Wilkinson Ecological Design. I'm a certified ecological restoration practitioner. We've enjoyed working on this project. As you've seen from the submission, it's a comprehensive restoration which extends from within the bordering vegetated wetland where the invasive species have encroached up through the 25 and 50-foot buffers. As Brian noted, there's considerable reduction of lawn, which will be replaced with a mixed native woody and herbaceous high wildlife value habitat area. Oftentimes we would be proposing this type of work as mitigation for some other development, but in our office we make a clear distinction between restoration and mitigation. You sometimes can use restoration for mitigation, but in this case this is just pure restoration for the benefit of wildlife habitat. We're excited to be collaborating with Lily Pond and the land bank. Their management plans are still in process, but we have corresponded, and I know I have a call scheduled next week with the land bank, and we'll be continuing to collaborate on that so that we can have an even more beneficial effect on the wildlife habitat for the larger area. The restoration activities primarily include the stem by stem invasive plant management, where mechanical removal is effective. We use that technique. In others, we use cut and wipe when the stem is literally too small, such as with vine honeysuckle and sometimes smaller diameter English ivy. We use targeted spot treatments of very low concentration of herbicide. We use wetland approved herbicides even when we're within the buffer area, because we're in the proximity of wetlands, which is above and beyond label requirements, but we feel it's a best management practice in these instances. The restoration plant community includes 10 native plants, American holly, red maple, and tupelo, 150 native shrubs, ranging from buttonbush in the wetland, Carolina rose, sweet pepper bush or plethora, high bush blueberry, red chokeberry, steeplebush, and winterberry, and an extensive list of native species that will be used as supplemental seeding in the wetland and upland areas, which are identified in our submission materials. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission might have about the project.
Thank you, everybody, for presenting. Looks like Seth has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everybody for presenting as well. Overall, I really appreciate this project. I do have a few minor concerns with some of the plants that were listed on the planting plan and a little bit of the depiction in the Wilkinson report. So on page 11 of the Wilkinson report, in the plant inventory under native species, I see willow, salix species. There are no willow that are native on Nantucket, and actually one Salix cinerea, the large gray willow, is classified as invasive. So if any of those are in the area, they should be removed. Also, we do have grape species, but we don't have Vitis vulpina, we have Vitis lambrusca, so just making sure that's what was actually surveyed. And then getting down into the actual Wilkinson planting plan, the trees and shrubs look great. The grasses look great. I have a few concerns about some of the native forms that are being presented. This is when we get into a little bit of Nantucket specificity. So, for instance, I know blue lobelia is native in Massachusetts, but it's not considered native on Nantucket. Also, in some parts of the state, it's actually considered non-native. Lychee spicata is considered non-native throughout all of Massachusetts. It's not county documented outside of garden areas on Nantucket at all. Also, the wild bergamot, Monarda fistulosa, that's another one that's on the mainland, but not on the Cape or islands. And world milkweed, Asclepias verticillata, that's also found on the Cape and the Vineyard, but not on Nantucket. So just a little bit of revision on those 4 plants. I know there's lots of forbs that would be great, and the rest of the plant list looks great. I like all the species. I think they would look great, but if we really want to make this as high quality of a restoration, Nantucket-centric restoration as possible, using truly Nantucket native species would be ideal here.
Sure thing. Thank you. And happy to look at those 4 species. I was taking notes as you were speaking. And with the planning moratorium on just the observed species, we did seek a second and third opinion actually on the willow that was found to make sure it wasn't Cineraria or Atracineraria. It was initially evaluated by Bartlett tree experts, but it wasn't terribly conclusive. So we sent it to Timothy Simmons, who's a former restoration ecologist for the state and someone I have a lot of respect with for those tougher plant IDs. And I know he verified that it was not either Cineraria or Atracineraria, and I'm just going through my emails, the benefits of Zoom meetings. You can do that, I guess, while you're speaking, to give you the exact identification here.
Yeah, as long as it wasn't one of those, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it was not, and so we felt, given that it's not one of the great willow species, we wouldn't manage it. Just leave it alone.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? I know I am like overjoyed to see a true restoration project come in without, ulterior motives kind of going on for mitigation. So I'm very happy to see this. So thank you everybody for working on it. Maureen?
I just have one quick question. How long do you expect all of this to, how much time will this take to finish all the plans that you have? And I want to second what Ashley just said. It's really a joy to look at something like this. So thank you.
Sure. So it's not as simple a question, or at least it's a simple question, not necessarily a simple answer. The overall initial sort of big push to do the removal of the invasive species is usually approximately 1 week with a project this size with our licensed technicians. And then we identify in page 8 and 9 sort of a seasonal timeline over the first three or 4 seasons, and then sort of recommended ongoing activities after that. Generally recommend people think about land management in 3-year increments. Usually you get a pretty stable plant community, native plant community within 3 years, and we reach what we call functional eradication. That means that all the invasive species that were there and reproducing when we started have been eradicated. And all you're really dealing with is birds flying by, dropping seeds, or things blowing in from adjacent properties, or otherwise finding their way onto the property. And we, at that point, we recommend you think about it as sort of ongoing management, where you're not really actively eradicating species, you're just making sure they don't get reestablished. So it's actually more monitoring than active management. But these are rich soils. They're always going to be conducive to invasive species. This is, essentially downtown Nantucket, and there are a lot of invasive species in downtown Nantucket. So I believe the owners, especially with their horticultural background, understand that this is not like putting in a lawn or something where you just have to mow it afterwards. It's a lifelong commitment. But the bulk of the work happens within the first year, and then steadily falls off over the next couple of years. We do like to have one full growing season of active management where we're just working on making sure the invasive species are getting off the landscape, and then we install the restoration plantings, and then it's sort of a mixed plant care and active management of the invasive species as we reach that functional eradication. So I warned you it wasn't a simple answer. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you, Seth.
I just want to say I appreciate your thoroughness and this. It'll be really interesting and enjoyable to walk by and see as this gets restored and taken back to original condition. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Ian?
Yeah, I also totally agree. I walk by there several times a week on my loop through Lily Pond, so I really appreciate it, as I'm sure many people who use Lily Pond will do. Thank you.
Joe?
I'm glad that they bought that piece of property that was quite contentious. So I'm very happy that they're going to make it one very nice piece of property. So thank you.
All right. Any other final comments or questions from commissioners? Joanne, do we have comments from the public on this one?
Yes, we do. We have one comment from Burton Bulkind. It just says, I am concerned about any disturbance of the wetland area. Even to get rid of invasive species will disturb nesting and feeding birds. This area has an abundant variety and number of birds, and would ask that the applicant ensure that the disturbance to any species is kept to a minimum.
Thank you, Joe. Do you guys have any time of year restrictions to try and prevent disturbing nesting birds?
Yes, we've sort of structured the timeline to begin this winter with your approval, and then we try to stop our activities by usually the 1st of April or mid-April if it's a cold spring. And at that point, we're really not doing much management in the spring because herbicide use is not effective, generally speaking, that time of year, and the lion's share of that work should already be done. And then we sort of come back after nesting season. There isn't as much nesting potential because some of that initial structure, as we know, wildlife will adapt, and while it doesn't usually prefer invasive species, sometimes it will use it if there's nothing else available. But those stalks of the Japanese knotweed, for example, have been cut down and injected, and the same with the woody invasive species. So there's a little bit less nesting habitat as a result of the management of the dormant season management activities. But we're not actively working during the next nesting season until we're just basically coming in and doing follow-up hand treatments through the summer. And that isn't usually any sort of disruption to nesting either. So that's the way that it's structured presently in the land management plan.
Thank you. And then ultimately, with native habitat being restored, you would increase nesting habitat over time. So I think that's important for people to realize. All right. Joanne, do we have everything we need to close this one?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Would the applicants like to close?
Please.
All right. Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Mark, looks like seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Eel,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Too.
And that moves us on to minor modifications. And we have Oak Hollow Realty Trust at 12B Oak Hollow Lane, represented by Ryan Maxwell.
Thank you. For the record, again, Ryan Maxwell with Bracken Engineering. This is a minor modification to a notice of intent that was issued in October of 2020. The previously approved work falls within 100 feet to an isolated vegetated wetland. On the plan, you can see the previously approved work in red, which includes a garage, barn structure, a fenced-in garden area, a generator, and a greenhouse. The work being proposed now is more or less a scaled-back version of what was previously approved. The new garage and fenced garden area are both about half the size of what was previously approved, and the applicant has removed the generator and the greenhouse from the proposed work. All of this new work is still outside the 50-foot buffer to that IVW. And that's pretty much it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Joe, do we have everything we need to issue the minor mod?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Is there a motion? Motion made by Joe. Is there a second? Seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ian?
is there an amended order of condition, or has that been continued or dropped?
That was continued.
Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. So it's continued until March 11th.
Got you.
So that moves us on to 16 Western Preservation Trust LLC at 16 Western Ave, and this is represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm before you tonight with a minor modification to install 2 geothermal wells as part of the HVAC system to service this house. The wells are located about 85 feet, maybe 83 from the coastal dune resource area, and are shown in red on the plan. They're on the opposite side of both the existing and proposed structures from the resource area, in fairly close proximity to an existing paved road. And we don't believe there would be any adverse impact or effect on the interests protected by the commission from these 2 wells. I'd be happy to address questions or concerns that you might have.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Joe, do we have everything we'd need to issue the minor mod?
Yes, we do.
All right, is there a motion to issue? Motion made by Seth. Is there a second? Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Thank you, Art.
Thank you very much.
And that moves us on to orders of conditions. Those were emailed out earlier today or yesterday. I cannot remember, but everybody should have those in their email. And we will begin with Nantucket Conservation Foundation, head of Plains Road.
So the only thing I noticed there, Madam Chair, was about the aquatic monitoring report. Did you want to add that in from what Ian said, or was that?
Yeah, I think that would probably be good. What do other commissioners think about the aquatic monitoring?
Yeah, I'm for it.
Yeah. Maureen's saying yes. I know Ian is. So let's add that one in.
I'll put that as 31. A yearly report for that.
I think a yearly report would be sufficient. Any other thoughts from commissioners? If not, would somebody like to make a motion to approve as amended? Motion made by Seth. Is there a second? Seconded by Ian, or do you have a comment, Ian?
I do. Does the monitoring include how much is going to be used, the volumes, and because I didn't actually catch that. I'd like to know how much is used, and I thought it was going to be clip and drip. So I've obviously, I've missed something here.
Yeah, I think so. They do have to provide a quantity and specific type of herbicide used. That's condition 22. So they definitely have to report like pesticide licenses and that sort of information. Would you like to add kind of anything else to that, Ian?
No, except I thought they were going to do cutting and then clip and drip. So I didn't realize they were going to do spraying. So it's probably time I hung up my hat, I would say. So I don't know what everybody else feels like, but.
We have a lot of applications and long projects, so it's easy to miss.
Well, that's kind of you to say so, Ashley. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah. I miss little things all the time, so don't be too hard on yourself. So I think Seth made the motion to approve as amended, and we're waiting on a second. Seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal.
Aye.
Engelborg.
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Topham. Oh, Joe, I couldn't hear you. Did you say aye? Okay.
Yeah, aye.
Probably my sound. All right, so that carries unanimously. Joanne, should we discuss Medui Creek? I know we don't have anything drafted.
Yes, if there's anything in particular, I think Jeff is probably going to do similar to the Shivmo Creek order. But yeah, if you have anything specific you're thinking, I could definitely take a note so he can prepare that for next meeting.
All right. Did anybody have any thoughts on that? For the most part, I trust the scientists involved in structuring their project. All right. So it looks like no thoughts on that one, and we'll trust Jeff to draft it.
You can draft and add in at the meeting if you think of anything.
Yeah, exactly. So that moves us on to Sandhurst MV LLC at 67 Squam Road.
So for this one, he just did the standard report and the cultivars and the invasive species be removed by best management.
Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted added in that any machinery shouldn't be stored in their buffer zone if they're using machinery.
Okay, great.
Or at least within the 25-foot buffer zone.
Thank you for that reminder, Seth. Any other amendments? If not, would someone like to make a motion to approve as amended?
Motion to approve is amended.
All right, motion made by Joe. Is there a second? Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to 9 E Street LLC at 9 E Street. Joanne, do we need conditions on like management of the IA system?
Well, I was just wondering, I think he normally puts in a sign off from the Board of Health or a certificate. I was just going to mention that. I can look back at a previous order and find that condition and how it's worded off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Actually,
Mark, yes?
the Board of Health requires a twice a year inspection by a professional, something around there to make sure they're working properly and they actually test the water.
Right, and I think we normally have that condition in our
Yeah.
conditions too.
I can find that and add that in.
Thank you, Joe.
Get the
Maureen?
correct verbiage.
I just wanted to confirm that the added things that Brian, it's in obviously their NOI, the amendments that Brian put in about the concerns about, the jackhammer,
Laboratory
whatever.
equipment.
But I mean, and so that would be, since the condition that's brought that says it should be done in accordance with the NOI, we don't have to add anything to specifically call that out, I assume. So I just wanted to confirm that.
Yes, that would be true, since that's in the
Right.
record as the way they're gonna perform it, we should be all set.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a good thing to clarify for sure. Any other thoughts or comments on this one?
I'll move for approval.
I think, are we waiting to get language on that amendment?
So would it be the applicant should provide any reports required by the Board of Health for the Commission to review? Would it be,
Yeah, I think that would suffice.
we've used that once on a different IA. One.
Yeah, unless commissioners think there's something else that we need to add. Looks like no, so I think adding that condition, Joe, should suffice.
Okay, so the applicant should provide any reports required by the Board of Health for the Commission to review. Number 19.
Yes. And then Mark, did you still want to make the motion? So motion to approve as amended. All right, is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Tricia and Adam Waygold at 3 New Hummock Circle.
Move to approve as drafted.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillip,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Andrew and Brooke Rieger at 7 East Lincoln Avenue. Oh, this one, Joanne, I think we should have a condition that materials in the garage need to be stored above the flood level.
Yep. Okay. I'll add that in as number 19.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on this one? If not, is there a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Motion made by Joe. Is there a second? Seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to 34 Westchester Street and 3 Wesco Place.
I'm loving this plan.
It's definitely a feel-good project for us. And hopefully it'll serve kind of as an example for other people who border the Lily Pond about what they can maybe do on their properties. Because I think when people walk by and see, you know, a true restoration a few years from now, it might motivate them to make some changes.
Good thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost an educational, you know, there should be something like, here is a wonderful example of what you can do. Because it might, you know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel perhaps as much. I mean, this has been an evening of a lot of good stuff, which is nice.
Well, I wonder, and this is outside of our purview, but you know, there's so many magazines, et cetera, that write about Nantucket, that if they would like highlight a restoration project like this, you know, we've had a few definitely around, but really kind of show the steps and then ultimately show the change in the landscape. It could be a really good story.
Good before and after.
Yeah.
And magazine.
Actually, I have a question for Seth.
Yes, Mark.
Seth, do we need to modify the plant description inventory they provided?
I think because they agreed to that and it's in the record for the notice of intent that they're committed to doing that.
Yes, I agree. Sometimes though, and I'm not seeing it here, we do have the condition that specifies the no cultivars.
Did he miss it off?
Yeah, we
This
could
one,
add
should we
that.
add that in?
Yeah, that would just kind of save us.
So I'll add that one in.
Thank you, Joe. Any other thoughts on this one?
That'll be condition 25.
Just to follow up on Joe's suggestion, on Joseph's suggestion that condition 22 does have a photographic record before and after, so that getting in touch with N Magazine, I think it'd be a great idea.
If the property owner wants that publicity.
That's very true.
But I think it would be great. All right, if there's no other thoughts on this one, is there a motion to approve as amended?
Sure.
Seconding.
All right, perfect. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. That is it for our orders of conditions for tonight. And that moves us on to extension requests. We have Dennis L. Winger and Barbara L. Waldman, trustees at 5 Old Quidnet Milk Route, represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here before you tonight to ask for a 1-year extension of the order of conditions for this property and project. This is one of the projects which has had the permit influenced and extended by the emergency orders of the governor related to COVID. And so there's some uncertainty as to what the expiration date ultimately would be under those orders because of the way that the legislation was structured in terms of from an effective date of the emergency orders to when the orders were going to expire. And so what we would ask for is just a 1-year extension so that they ultimately can finish this project. They have upgraded the septic system under the order, but they did not, as modified, but did not do the other aspects of the project yet.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions from commissioners? Okay. If not, is there a motion to issue the one-year extension? Motion made by Seth. Is there a second? Seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to other business, approval of minutes from February 11th. Thank you, Terry, for the minutes. Did anybody see anything in the minutes they want to comment on? Looks like no. If not, is there a motion to approve as drafted?
So moved with thanks to Terry, as always.
Yes, so motion made by
Thank you,
Ian,
Terry.
seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. And again, thank you, Terry. We'd be lost without you. That moves us on to reports. We have crack.
So the meeting, well, sorry. So I think Joe forwarded to you the Arcadis contract with the town regarding SPPF, and also the what the actual amounts of sand would be. And so you've got that to have a look at. And then about at 11:42 into the meeting, the subject of monitoring came up, and Matt Fee, who is the select board's representative, observed that, that there isn't enough, that there's not enough monitoring going on, and that the fee structure is such that it should be higher, and that there should be, more enforcement. And so it occurred to me that perhaps we should prepare a letter requesting from the select board that they consider adding to the staff of the natural resources so that that can take place.
Thank you, Ian. I think that's a good suggestion. And it kind of piggybacks again on us updating our regulations so that we can structure a little bit differently, which of course is a slower process than we would all hope for. But I'm glad that those conversations are being had. What does everybody think about potentially drafting a letter to the select board?
Wait a minute.
Seth?
I'm totally for it. I think maybe you should draft it rather than having like Jeff or Joanne draft it, because it could be construed as a conflict of interest, asking for more help with their own staff. So if it comes from you instead, it's a little bit better.
Okay. I can definitely try and put something together to run by you guys. Because there certainly is like a never-ending mountain of work that Jeff and Joe are trying to get through. So Any other thoughts on that? All right, so hopefully I'll maybe have a draft pen by our next meeting for that. All right, so that moves us on to CPC.
Really wasn't much going on, just funds, requisitions were released, and we're gonna create a sign that's gonna go on all the properties so they know that the money came from the CPC. But otherwise, it was pretty standard meeting. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Joe. NP and EDC?
Same, I could just echo what Joe just said. Our meeting was very standard, very quick, just a couple of things to approve for, kind of mechanical reasons. So nothing much.
Thank you, Maureen. That moves us on to monitoring reports. We had Nantucket Conservation Foundation, Medui Creek, and we also had their windswept bog on Barnard Valley Road in our packet. So hopefully everybody looked at those. And if you didn't, you can still look at them. Any comments on the monitoring reports? Looks like no. I do always appreciate how thorough the Conservation Foundation is with their reports, because you really have just clear documentation of everything that took place. So I think that's important. So that brings us to commissioners' comments. Any commissioners' comments? Joe?
Just want to let you guys know I'm not going to re-up for the next post, so we'll be stepping down. Sorry.
Well, that's a big thumbs down.
I know, I saw that, Ashley. Thank you.
I'm sure you're moving on to bigger and better things. But
I will. Yeah. No, actually, I'm not. I mean, I do have other things I want to go do, but yes, I just it's with heavy heart. A lot of debate. So, but yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for letting us know. I was actually on a walk this week and worried about your status for re-upping, and it looks like I was right to worry.
That's not good if you're on your walk and you're thinking of me. That's just bad. That's like a nightmare, girl.
It's better than thinking about school.
Yeah. No, I just figured the sooner I gave notice that, people could kind of step up or start to consider it, or call your friends, someone that wants to step up. So I figured the sooner the better.
Yeah, no, thank you. We appreciate that.
No problem.
Any
I'm
other?
gonna poke in time from time, though.
Good.
Joe, I'm crushed that you didn't, allow me to try and twist your arm on this one, man.
No, there's no debate. I've had a couple phone calls since then for different reasons, but it's funny they did ask me.
There's still time, Ian. We can work them over.
Okay.
Okay, good night.
Lunch next week. All right.
No peer pressure here.
No.
All right. Any other commissioners' comments? So one thing I wanted to mention, I know some of us got an email from Audubon, and I think that letter will hopefully get out to all commissioners. I'm hoping, Joe, we can maybe put that on as an agenda item for next meeting to get an update.
Absolutely, yes, I will put it on.
Okay, awesome.
Or I can at least touch base with Jeff and find out where that is with Rob too.
Yeah, I think that would be good to get kind of the status of where the DPW is with that.
Yeah.
Ian?
Well, I know everybody's busy, but I was a bit shocked that the town hadn't replied to Mass Audubon in 3 months.
They haven't replied to us, and we sent like letters a year ago. So I guess
well, I rest my case. So, yeah.
The letter is pretty scathing, I thought. I mean, sent a copy to everybody in sight.
Yeah.
So it makes the town look pretty bad.
Thank you, Mark. It does, and I noted that myself. So it's unfortunate.
I was quite surprised at the letter. I mean, It was a great letter, but just where's the town?
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Especially, I mean, Mass Audubon is a very important landholder in the state. Even though they might not seem significant on Nantucket, they certainly are. And this is an important property and situation. So hopefully this will spur the town to, at the very least, respond to what happened.
Yeah, they're required to do it, but that doesn't mean they're less important.
Exactly.
So.
Any other commissioners' comments? No. So Joanne, do we have any administrator staff reports?
I just wanted to talk to you about the dates I sent out to you for meetings and see if anyone had a chance to look at those. I have reserved quite a few times and dates. And I think after next week's meeting, we can probably decide, you know, which ones are going to be regulation hearings. And then if we have to have a follow-up for the annual review from Scodsett Bluff, we'll have an extra spot for that. And then if we do the DPW and Land Bank on their own, have a meeting for that too. So was everyone able to look at those dates and see they're available?
Yes, I know I did. Did everybody else kind of take a look and I guess touch base with Joanne if dates don't work for you?
Yeah,
Yes, my hiking up to Kanchenjunga in the Himalayas is going to have to be postponed, obviously.
well, I'm canceling my trip to Cancun.
And then also just a reminder that before the next meeting, there's going to be the 4 till 5 executive session on the 11th, which Jeff will be sending out the meeting information for that. So, or I will be for Jeff when we get that set up. So just to put that on your calendar because I didn't have it. So I think you all did.
No, I think it's good to put these dates down.
So we have all this, you know, some of them are 4 o'clock, some of them are 5, some Mondays, some are Wednesdays. So just what we were able to get, but hopefully we can get to a lot of stuff and get a couple of regulation meetings in and get that squared away.
Yes, definitely. We'll do the hard work and get it done before we lose Joe. We're going to finish these regulations. All right. So I think that is it. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Seth. Is there a second? Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham. Oh, that I couldn't hear you again, Joe. Oh, there we go. So that carries unanimously, and this meeting is adjourned.
I'll be talking to you, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe.
Thank you.
No sign language either.
I'm screen calling everyone.
Oh, and before you, is Joe gone? He's gone already. Look at that.
Oh, man.
Bye, everybody.
Up and like Joanne, thank you.
Thank you. I'll see
Thank
you
you,
in a couple
Joanne.
weeks.
Thank you,
Bye.
Terry.
Bye.
Yeah. Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night,
night.
all.